Good evening. Thanks for coming along. We'll get started in the next few minutes. Grab a pizza, grab a beer, take a seat. See you in a minute. All right, good evening. All right, thanks for coming. Thanks for coming, everyone. Can you be my audio guy? All right, guys, let's get started. Come and grab a chair, grab a last slice of pizza. Do my usual, start 15 minutes late. Everyone's here. A happy Valentine's Day to everybody. Thanks for coming along. Welcome back to 2019 for Melbourne CocoaHeads. I think this is the start of our 12th year or 11th year running thereabouts. We started, yeah, I thought about looking it up. I'm not going to speak for too long. Going to go through a few little items before we get onto our presentations. Whoa. We're going to start that again. I'll go right back to here. Apologies. I only pushed the button once. Last year I removed my slide, and this is a copy of last year's slide. My name's Jesse. If you don't know who I am, I've been organising the pizza and the beer and misspelling things on these slides for the last few years. I'm kind of the admin of the Slack channel and sort of make sure everything turns up on time, but I don't do as much presenting as everyone else does, but I'm just sort of bringing everything together. Oh, it's not working. I'm going to start tonight with our code of conduct that we put together a couple of years ago, and pretty much it's a document that has a really nice, concise TLDR. As a community, we're dedicated to providing an inclusive environment is the key for everyone, regardless of your gender identity and expression, age, sexual orientation, disability, physical appearance, body size, race, ethnicity, religion, or lack thereof, or technology choices. We're all friends these days. All of these platforms have been around for many years. We can all be friends. This code of conduct is published on the website. If you feel like something's gone wrong or something's not quite right, when you turn up to Melbourne CocoaHeads, please get in touch. The code of conduct email comes to myself and a couple of other members of the community, and we'll address your concern with the utmost importance. You can also just grab me personally on the night as well. And if your issue is with me, Rob's also up here as the sort of the sidekick on the sound desk. CocoaHeads exists as a number of different events. This we call the presentation night. We also have a hack night, a drinks night, and a breakfast morning that remains with its legacy NS breakfast prefix. There's no swift implementation of the breakfast. Presentation night is every second Thursday from 6, right here. Pizza and drinks from 6 p.m. We normally have a couple of lightning talks and a main presentation. I should update this, it's a little bit old, but main presentations generally 20 minutes these days. We live stream everything to YouTube. I then go back and repost the individual presentations as well. And we're hosted here, as I said. Hack nights start at 6 as well, with introductions, a bit like this, from 6:30. It's a alcohol-free, really inclusive evening in combination with the Android user group. Bring your laptop, iOS project, Android project, and have a hack. We're at Cognizant, which is just down the road on William Street. That's been super successful over the last year. Drinks night, hack night used to just be at a pub. We've turned that into an actual hosted evening at a company, and it's been really positive. That's a shot from one of the hack nights last year. Everyone looks really busy, which is good. So our upcoming events are hack night on the 20th, which is next week. Drinks night on the 26th, which is a Tuesday evening. NS Breakfast is always the first Friday of the month on the 1st. And the Google Developers Group is on February 27th. And they're actually hosted at the Google office, Collins Street or something. And that's another shot from a hack night as well. There's lots of familiar faces in there as well. You can find CocoaHeads at, I mean, you've obviously found CocoaHeads. You can find CocoaHeads at melbournecocoaheads.com. We're at Melbourne Coco on Twitter. We have a Slack channel, which is always, it's always got some good conversations. If you've got any like daily questions or issues, normally most things get resolved. Or if you're wondering, is it just me? Like today, the iTunes Connect login thing just wasn't working properly. Yep. MelbourneCocoaHeads.com/live redirects to our YouTube channel, which has the last 3 or 4 years of presentations up there. And I'm Jesse at MelbourneCocoaHeads.com. That's how you can get in touch with me. Volunteers is a channel on the Slack channel. If you're interested in helping, would you like to present? Would you like to help out? This is the format. We've got pizza and drinks. If you were interested in helping greet people arriving, that's something we need to work on this year. If you're interested in just helping with logistics and other things, please just get in touch, join volunteers. I'm normally in there at the moment sort of saying, hey, this is what's happening, this is what I'm doing. Yeah, join in on Slack. Our YouTube channel, as I said, cocoaheads.com/live. We're nearly at the 200 subscribers mark where we get a custom URL. At the moment, it's just a 301 redirect from /live. CocoaHeads is like the beer and pizza doesn't just arrive from nowhere. There's sponsors that pay for the venue, pay for the pizza, pay for the beer, and that includes Hack Night as well. Sponsors this year are kind of work in progress. If your company would like to sponsor, it's a great way to get your logo up here every month in front of the community. And the community and the sponsorship goes all year too. So if you think you might be looking to hire people or you just want to gain that sort of rapport with the community, sponsoring is not expensive relative to recruiters or other methods of hiring people. As a dev, I'm not sure what I think about that. Yes, spend it on beer and pizza. Our venue this year is YBF Ventures. We've locked this in all the way through to December, so you don't have to remember the address. Just arrive at the same place you arrived this month, at the same time, on the second Thursday. Tonight's agenda, we've got Adrian, who's going to talk about, I knew abbreviating them would have been a problem. He's going to talk about asking for app reviews. Dermot's going to talk about everyone's a designer. Yeah, I should have put more description anyway. And Vlas is going to record some AR Kit sessions. And then the Irish Times is our go-to afterwards. So if you want to leave early and go straight to the Irish Times, that's fine. Well, maybe go at the break. All right, so if you're new to CocoaHeads, every month at this time we do a kind of who's hiring. So if you're representing a company or you are a company, or you're looking to hire anyone from the community, stand up, tell us who you are, where you're from, and what you're looking for. Fletch will give us an example.
Hey. Oh, geez, that's pretty hefty. Yeah, right.
So we turn the volume up for me.
Michael slash Fletch from Latitude Financial. We're building banking/finance app. Love for some extra people join our team. Come talk to me if you're interested. I can tell you more. Senior dev, yep. Heavy on the RX Swift, thanks to Matt here. Yeah, but anyway, come to talk to me and I can teach you some more.
I can hand it over. Hello, so I'm from ARC Group, formerly, well, parts of it formerly Outware Mobile. So we're currently hiring for Android and iOS developers. I think we might be tending towards senior, but I think everyone's welcome to apply. Go for your life.
What was your name?
Conrad.
Conrad. Thanks, Conrad.
Hi, my name's Alex. I'm MD of AppScore, so we're a mobile dev company. We're currently on the hunt for a bunch of senior and lead iOS, React Native, and Android devs. We've probably got about 10, 12 roles going at the moment. So, yeah, and that's us. Anybody wants to chat, come and grab me a tap.
Awesome. I might, before you guys leave, just grab me. I'll grab your details, because I'd like to put them in the jobs channel in Slack. It's just a... Oh, I don't need to speak to you then. The YouTube's... No, I'll chat with you.
Is there anyone else?
Cool. All right. So we do that every month, and if you want to sponsor, it's a great opportunity for me to say, hey, this company is sponsoring CocoaHeads, and then say we're hiring. It looks good. I'm going to get out of the way. We're going to swap the presenter over, and Adrian will be up here in a sec. So grab a fresh drink if you need one, and we'll be back in 30 seconds. Cheers.
Hi, everyone. I'm Adrian, a long-term attendee, first-time speaker here at CocoaHeads. And I want to talk to you about review prompting today and how you can get your app closer to a 5-star rating on the App Store. Because in my experience, 5-star ratings don't generally happen just by themselves. Maybe you're that lucky, but I think most people aren't. And my sort of theory behind that is that unhappy users are just much more motivated to leave you a rating on the App Store than happy ones. They obviously don't want to use your app, so they need to vent somewhere. Happy users, they're just happy using your app. Like, why would they do anything else? That's a bit of a problem if you want good ratings. So the solution to that, obviously, is ask your happy users to rate your app, and maybe help some unhappy ones on the way as well, which I'll cover as well. Since iOS 10.3, we've got SKStore ReviewController for that. That's kind of Apple's response to a litany of the library apps that were letting you developers ask for ratings before, which sort of led to some developers sort of pestering users for ratings, and it's not a good user experience. So Apple kind of stepped in and provided a native UI for that, which is the little UI pop-up you see at the bottom of the screen there. SKStore ReviewController only has it's a class with only one method, request review, so there's not much to it. The great thing about it for both users and developers is that it lets users rate the app from within the app, so you don't actually have to go out of the app to the App Store to leave a rating anymore. It comes with a few restrictions, though. So it will only be shown 3 times in a period of 365 days for any user. So you can call request review all you want, but after it's been shown for 3 times, nothing will happen. Users can also disable the rating pop-up altogether for all their apps in the Settings app. So you never really know whether, when you call request review, something's going to be shown. And another thing to sort of note is that as a developer, you don't get any feedback from the request review call. So you don't know whether the UI was shown. You'd also, if it was shown, you don't know what the user actually did, whether they left a review or not. So it's a bit of a black box, and I think Apple did that quite by design. So SKStore ReviewController sort of deals with the how to ask for a rating in your app, but it doesn't really deal with when to ask for it and who to ask. As I mentioned before, the who to ask is kind of your happy users. And they're kind of different for every app, like how do you define a happy user? But it sort of comes down to sort of 3 broad rules. So a happy user has used your app kind of long enough to form an opinion of your app and like it or love it. I had to throw a love heart in there because, you know, it's that day. Then your user sort of needs to have had some positive experiences in your app. So that's obviously different for every app, but it might be some kind of achievement. In a game, it might be, you know, you got through a next level or you got something done. And also, you may not want to ask any users that had recent negative experiences. And the obvious, like the most well-known negative experience is, of course, the crash. Not that we build apps that crash, of course. Then the other point is the right time. What's the right time in your app flow to actually prompt a user for a rating? Is this when a user feels particularly positive about the world, the app, themselves, while using the app? So they might have achieved something just a second ago, or they might have finished something. And also when it doesn't interrupt the user too much. So you don't want to ask a user to rate your app when they're in the middle of something. You kind of want to do it at sort of the quieter moments in the flow of your app. If you sort of look at that in sort of a loose flow diagram-y kind of way, on the left we see just a user using your app. And as sort of a byproduct of using your app, some events may change the model you have of your user. And so that might be things like how many sessions has your user used your app for, so it's kind of related to like has the user used your app long enough to actually form an opinion of your app. It may be like a really positive experiences in your app, or a proxy of that. Or negative experiences, so like you might want to log that your user just had a crash. So somewhere in your app flow, a user will hit a point in your app that triggers the actual rating scenario, sort of the rating flow. So when that happens, you look at that user model and compare that to what a happy user looks like for you. So you look like, has this user had enough positive experiences? Has he been using the app long enough? Has the app not crashed lately? And if that hasn't happened, you may do one of 2 things. So there's an optional step here in this flow diagram, which is showing a triage pop-up. So that's a simple alert that says, are you enjoying this app? A user can answer yes or no. If no, then clearly your model of the user, in this case, wasn't for a happy user, wasn't quite right. And you accidentally selected someone who wasn't happy. So instead of sending that user on to actually rate the app, the user and yourself are much better off if you help that user solve the problem they have. So instead of showing a rating pop-up, you might send them to your customer support screen or whatever it may be. If the user indicates that they are happy, you show your rating prompt, or you say SKStore ReviewController, request review, and then hopefully it will be shown. So the triage, or not to triage, the triage step is kind of an optional, as I said. It's sort of there if you choose to use it to filter out false positives in identifying users to leave a rating. And at the same time, it's also a way to help those unhappy users, as I mentioned. So how do we measure success? How do we know that what we've implemented is actually delivering results? So a couple of obvious ones, like obviously we look at the average rating our app now gets on the App Store and compare that to what it previously was, and we hope that it's better. We might also be interested in the volume of ratings. We might actually, one of the objectives might be to get more ratings, because more high quality ratings is better than less high quality ratings. And thirdly, we might want to look at conversion, so in your app. So from people that from the users that you identified to ask for a rating, how many of those actually result in a rating on the App Store? So how do we get this right? My sort of approach to that is start very simple. So like I talk about a user model, but or what a happy user looks like, but it doesn't have to be like a complex model at all. It can be a few parameters that determine that. And I'll show a few case studies in a second that sort of give you examples of that. I would also start quite conservatively, and what I mean with that is start out by putting the bar quite high for what a happy user is. So require that they've had a lot of positive experiences in your app. So that sort of ensures that when you start experimenting with your setup, you don't really run the risk of getting negative reviews, but only get positives. And then sort of iterates towards the sweet spot. And the sweet spot, so basically by lowering kind of the requirements for a happy user, for a user that fits the profile to be prompted, you sort of hope to increase the number of ratings without lowering the quality of the ratings. So you want to get more ratings, but you still want them to be 5 stars. And if your setup allows for it, I would recommend sort of doing this iteration either in short bursts of time, like, run a test for a day, run another test for a day, and if you can, like, run it in single countries if you got a big user base. Then once you're happy, enable it globally, and you also have the choice then to reset your ratings in the App Store, which is something that, I don't know, came about in the past year or so that you could do that. So with every update of your app, you can reset your ratings. So particularly if you have quite a substantial amount of average ratings, like 2 stars or 2.5 stars, 3 stars, and you now have tuned your system pretty well, you may want to get rid of those old ratings so you don't have to compensate for them. So to make this all a bit more concrete, I've got a couple of case studies. The first one is an app called Tiny Planet Photos, which is one of my apps. It's a photo filter app. It basically makes stereographic projections of your photos. It's also called Tiny Planets, kind of see why. So it's a really simple app. It lets you sort of make them in one tap and then tweak them to your heart's content. So for this app, kind of the right time to prompt a user for a rating is either when a user has just created a tiny planet, so they've just had a nice experience of going, whoa, this is awesome. Or even better, when a user has shared a tiny planet, because now we not only know that they just created one, but they created one that they're actually really happy with. We kind of use both in this app because the volume of people that share versus the volume of people that don't share. We basically don't get enough volume of shares to get enough ratings, or as many as we'd like. So we use them both. In terms of the model for what the right user needs to fit, we're quite aggressive in this app. And that's because of the nature of the app. It's kind of gimmicky app. It's not super sticky. Most people download it, use it for a few days, go like, whoa, this is really awesome, and then sort of like, leave it on their phone. But it's not like a frequently used app for a long time. So that's why we've configured it pretty aggressively. So it only takes, the user only needs to have it installed for a day or more than a day. Only needs to have a minimum of 2 sessions with the app. But needs to have shared at least 2 images or videos. It makes videos as well. And then the user shouldn't have had bad experiences, so no crash for 5 days. And we do use the triage step in this app at the moment. So if a user has gone through that triage step and said, well, I actually don't like the app at the moment, we kind of give ourselves like 100 days to change this user's mind and ask them again.
How many crashes do you get?
Sorry?
How many crashes do you get?
In the app?
Yeah, because that's a part of your metric. Do you have
No, it's a very stable app, but we do have the occasional crash, and then we don't ask for 5 days. So this is kind of the before snapshot of this app. So not 3.7 star average, not crazy bad, not amazing, and only like a rating every 3 days or so. And after implementing this review prompting feature, we got to 4.8 star rating and over 2 stars, over 2 ratings a day. So both the volume and the quality of the ratings was a lot higher. Sorry?
How many active users would you typically have per day?
I don't know off the top of my head. I think it's around 1,000 or something. So, sorry?
20% of users review your app.
No, I don't think so. I don't think those math are right. Sounds a bit high. So in summary, we got from 3.6 to 4.7 star average, an increase of 550% in the number of ratings. And that's sort of as a side note, it has very little impact on written reviews. So people can leave a star rating, but they can also write a review. This feature didn't have any real impact on these written reviews, which kind of makes sense because the friction for that is a lot higher. You actually do need to go out of the App Store, and obviously you also need to write something. So, a rating only takes 1 tap. So, on to case study 2, which is iFlix, where I implemented a similar feature about a year ago. For people not aware of what iFlix is a streaming video on-demand service, specifically focused on like Southeast Asia, Middle East, and Africa. We sort of suffered from pretty average reviews there. And as developers, we were pretty sad about that. So I suggested to implement a feature like this, and because I basically said the app is not as bad as the ratings are, so let's do something about it. And this app is very different from Tiny Planet Photos. Of course, like it's got a massively bigger user base. It's got a very different user base. It's a much more sticky app. People sign up and keep using the app for a long time. So yeah, I thought it was interesting to show that as a sort of a counterexample. In this app, the right time was identified as when a user exits the player after the video player, after completely watching an asset, so a movie or an episode from a TV series. The idea being that when you exit the player, you're sort of in between things, and if you watch something all the way to the end, you must have liked it, otherwise you would have stopped and exited earlier. Because the app is so different and the app is much stickier, we were a lot more conservative in terms of the parameters for a happy user. So a minimum of like a month after sign up of the user, so the user needed to have been with the service for at least a month and have watched or partially watched at least 50 assets, so 50 episodes or 50 movies. Setting the bar quite high, but we had quite a big pool of users, so that's okay. And at least a week without a crash. And again, we use triage there as well, so if a user indicated not enjoying the app, we gave ourselves 3 months to sort of turn that around. With Tiny Planet Photos, I sort of ran experiments sort of globally for everyone because I don't have massive infrastructure to target different countries, which at iFlix we did. So we actually ran our first experiment in one country for 24 hours. And the result was this. This is an app bot graph for 5 months of average rating for the app in that country. So it starts out at, I'm not sure it's really legible, but it starts out at about 2.7 star average, sort of creeps up to 2.8, and then all the way at the end, it jumps to 3.2 overnight, which was pretty exciting when I came into work and saw this graph. It's like, whoa, cool.
Sorry, Andrew.
Yeah.
When you say you tested it in one market.
Yep.
Did you
Yeah, we have feature toggles at iFlix that also you can choose to turn features on per region, per country. Yeah.
Is that with a ratings reset expired?
No, that was without a reset. So it was 0.4 more overnight without resetting the ratings. Yes, I'll show you what it could have been right here. This was the ratings breakdown for that 24-hour period in that one country. So we got over 200 ratings at a 4.8 star average. Got everybody pretty excited. We did a sort of conversion analysis there as well. So there's sort of, with this triage, there's sort of 2 steps. We presented, or 3 steps, we present the triage, and then about 80% of the people that we showed that actually said, yes, I enjoy the app. So our user model for what a happy user looked like was pretty good. And then from those people that we then showed the rating, UI, 37.6% actually gave us a rating in the App Store, which sort of gave us an overall conversion of 30%, which we were pretty happy with. So happy that we didn't really iterate on our model afterwards, and we were like, let's just roll this out globally. And in this case, we did reset the ratings because we were at that 2.8 average kind of globally. And it doesn't make sense to get all these 5-star reviews to sort of balance out those 2.7 star average. So we went from 2.7 stars to 4.7 stars globally pretty much overnight. And had like a 12 times increase in the rating volume as well. So it was a massive success, and therefore I was really excited. But again, like written reviews, no, not really. So sort of in rounding out, why would you implement review prompting for your apps? Well, clearly because your App Store rating goes up, and your App Store rating being higher should lead to more downloads, and more downloads should lead to more profit. So that's kind of the business case. It's a bit hard to quantify because there's way too many variables to actually relate your App Store rating to profit. But there should be some kind of relationship. Another one that was really interesting, definitely I noticed that iFlix was sort of developer satisfaction and morale. Like it makes a huge difference for a developer to show up to work every day when you know you're working on a 4.7 star app versus a 2.7 star app, even if the apps are exactly the same. Like, we didn't change the app itself, but it just makes you feel better. Apart from that, it's also a very little development effort. At iFlix, I implemented this feature by myself, kind of in between my other work. No one else needed to be involved, not even really a designer, because all the UI was like just standard Apple UI. So it was just one developer doing it in between things and having an impact. That's it. Questions?
With the UI thing. Question on the UI.
Yep.
You talked about, I guess, using alerts.
Yep.
Did you experiment with like built-in UI? So the thing with alerts is quite often people get the wrong time, and I get annoyed, and I might be more inclined to say yes, I like it, and then give a bad review. I'm a bad user, but.
Sure.
Have you experimented with having the review triage thing built into other things? So, for example, if you've got a scrolling list, as you scroll past, instead of an advert that you might see on a freemium app, you might see, are you enjoying this? Do you want to review it?
Right. No, we haven't. There were suggestions to do that. Would have loved to experiment with that, but I was kind of lucky enough or pushed hard enough to get this done, and people were then so excited with the results that they were like, oh yeah, we're done. Let's move on and do all the other things we need to do. So yeah, that's definitely scope for more experiments.
Did the triage step come as a result of a failed experiment, or have you ever run one of these without using the triage step?
I don't think in the end we did run it without triage ever.
No, are you sure before you want to?
Yeah, no, I mean,
I
guess it was kind of, I sort of suggested doing it at iFlix because people were a bit like not sure about this whole thing. So it's like if we put another fail-safe in, then Plus, you know, I do think like helping unhappy users is a good thing as well. So it kind of allows you to do that as well.
Yeah, so you mentioned that you can only prompt the user 3 times in 365 days.
Yep.
Does that reset when you update the app?
No. No, the idea, Apple's idea behind it is to not have app developers pester users all the time. So if all it took was like for you to submit another build to Apple and update your app to get 3 more bytes at it, that would kind of defeat the purpose, I guess. So it's really per calendar year, not per 365-day period. Yeah.
Were you tracking analytics on the people that actually said not favourable?
Sorry?
Were you tracking any analytics on the people that went down the non-favourable path? And were you getting much helpful feedback from that?
No, yeah, no. I mean, well, here we obviously like, we do now like 20% of the people here we actually send to our customer service feedback form in the app. But I did check up with customer support, and they actually didn't notice a bump in their customer support requests. So we didn't dig further into that, but I assume that most people that got presented the customer support thing just clicked it away again. So there may have been some people that we helped, but
how do you measure the number of days since the last crash? Do you use a third-party SDK that gives you this info, or?
Sorry, how do you?
How do you measure the number of days since the last crash?
We've got in both Tiny Planet photos and iFlix, we use Crashlytics, and Crashlytics has a delicate protocol that you can get callbacks on the next launch of your app after a crash and tells you that your app crashed. So we use that date and log that.
Have you done any experimenting with other methods of increasing reviews? For example, we make app previews for clients, and a lot of the App Store listing components could set people's expectations before they even download the app so that they know what they're getting, and that's something we see that the videos benefit. Have you done anything looking at those kind of aspects that could improve the overall ratings before somebody even downloads it, so people who don't need the app never even install it?
Right. In short, no. I guess App Store optimization is, to me, still a bit of a dark art. Or at least it's hard for me. I tried doing it, but it's hard for me to sort of measure results and things like that. And then your idea of like sort of setting the expectations of the user in that as well to sort of prevent negative ratings. Yeah, that's even a step further than I've ever thought. So, yeah.
We've had clients with that idea, so just
yeah. I think it's an interesting idea. I'm not sure how you can effectively measure that. So.
It might be kind of a naive question, but have you been able to track the work back from this to improve downloads based on the increased rating to kind of close the loop?
Yeah, as I said, it's really hard to do. Maybe unless all you change in your app is add this feature, but both at iFlix, especially at iFlix, there's always lots of new features going in and lots of marketing campaigns going on at the same time, so it's really hard to isolate that. For Tiny Planet photos, it might, in principle, be easier, but I don't know, there's so many variables that I haven't been able to.
Sorry, this is my first time. I don't know if this is done. Does anyone know about like any kind of evidence-based rating equals increased downloads data anywhere? I'd just be curious. Like, it seems pretty obvious that like higher rating is better, but
I can say that I have seen it, but I don't remember where. So you can probably find people have done studies on that.
Any other questions?
Adrian, the outcomes that you experienced is exactly what I've experienced in a recent app implementation.
Yep.
We implemented a similar kind of, metric gating of before you ask the user, and then we reset the rating on release of that version, and it went exactly from like a 2.5 something to a 4.5 something, and it was
Yeah, maybe it doesn't matter what you do.
If you
always 4 point something.
You didn't reference the Apple documentation in your presentation, but the Apple documentation on this is really, really good. If you read that and implement basically what it says, it's pretty common sense. They've even got some demo code. You too can get 4.5-star rating for your
I was just looking through Apple's documentation the other day in preparation for this talk, and I hadn't seen it before, and I was like, that's very close to what I'm doing.
It's pretty good.
Makes a lot of sense.
And I just love it so Apple that their SDK's got one API method, and you call it, and that's it. It shows or doesn't. You go to all this effort, Apple's like, we're the boss. We're the boss. That's it, yeah. Yeah, thank you, Adrian.
Thanks.
We'll just swap over super quickly. Grab a pizza and a beer for the next couple of minutes, and we'll be back.
Or the bathroom if you need the bathroom.
Or the bathroom. That's also... The bathroom's down the back to the left.
Hello, hello. Hi guys. How's it? Voice, yeah. Checking. 1, 2, 3. Cool. All right. Hi, everyone. My name's Dermot. This is going to be something a little bit different. I'm not an iOS guy. I'm not a dev. My background's design. I work as a product manager and a business analyst at the moment. So my talk doesn't have any statistics in it either. I'm going to talk to you guys about design. And I'm going to give this talk with 10% more love than I normally do because it is Valentine's Day. So this talk is about design, but it's going to be about big design. I'm not going to talk too much really about how to make that button sexy or what fonts go together well. What I want to give you guys is something that you can take away and develop a bit of a practice of design. So it's going to help you design pretty much anything you might come across. So what it will really give you is fundamentals. And it will help you understand, hopefully, a little bit why those fonts go together when you see them, or why that app flow is awesome. Cool, so how am I going to do that? So I'm going to give you 3 things specifically today. I'm going to give you a bit of a mentality, a bit of a designer mentality that I want you to take with you. And I'll give you 2 more slightly hands-on things. I'm going to give you a handy-dandy 5-point framework that you can design anything with. And I'm going to give you some specific tips on visual design. So we'll come back to that a little bit because that is practical. So something hopefully you can take forward and apply in the long term, the visual stuff, hopefully you can apply immediately. So first thing, right out of the gates, what I want to get rid of is any idea that you might have that, I don't use Photoshop, I'm not a designer, that's not me, that's someone else, that's the hungover designer over in the corner that's been on the couch for 3 hours and is only finally starting to do work. Just because you can't use Sketch or Photoshop or whatever it may be, most design doesn't happen at that stage. A lot of it happens way before you drag the tools out. So, you know, if you're an engineer or you're a doctor or you're a lawyer, those guys are doing design as well. Basically, I'm defining design as anything you're trying to create that has a goal, really is design here. The other analogy I like to use around that is kind of the musical analogy. So if someone asks you, what do you think of a piece of music, saying, you know, I don't know how to use Photoshop is like saying, well, I don't know how to play guitar, but you have ears and you've got a brain. So, you know, you have that skill set. The other good news is we've grown up in basically probably the most designed world that's ever existed. You guys have a lifetime of exposure out to design out there in the real world. You've got this huge library of stuff within you already. The problem that I see is that most people don't get taught which design levers to pull at which time. Basically, everyone kind of mashes the keyboard all at once. It looks like crap, and then you throw your hands up in the air and go, all right, I'm never going to try that again. So what I'm going to do is break things down for you and give you some of those levers to pull. This is my handy-dandy framework. It's pretty simple. It's the way to think about this, it looks linear, but each of these are activities that are fundamental to design. So you can go through them linearly if you want, but that's not the way I want you to kind of take these today. Each of these are activities, and one is like riding a bike, one is like cooking a dinner, another one might be like building a boat. The kind of things that you can develop a craft and a practice around each of them individually. So try not to think about it too linear, even though I'm going to go through it in that way. These can be used at all scales, so you can go through this when you're designing an app, a whole project, or you might just have an epic or a story that you can pinch these elements out of and work through as well. And so just try and keep in mind as I go through each of those the value rather than the phase that these might be that I'm trying to point out as I go through. Basically, I want you to think of these as a framework for thinking, not so much doing, if that makes sense. So number 1, concept. Concepts. So concepts where projects basically start to fail. You've probably, if you've all been working in this, been in a similar scenario where the product manager or the client or whatever comes up and go, oh, we need a payment page, or we need a new shopping cart, or we need a new home page. And that's kind of equivalent to they saying, I need you to build me a boat. You have a big meeting and a kickoff meeting and go, cool, we need a boat, that's all right, everyone walks away. First person walks away and goes, sweet, this boat is going to be awesome. Second person walks away and goes, sweet, this boat is going to be awesome. And the third person walks away and goes, sweet, this boat is going to be awesome. We're already starting to kind of diverge out into all of these areas. So the trick with concept, the reason you get into this is because concepts, it's all about defining what you want, but when you don't know anything, you don't know that stuff is missing. So it kind of becomes this self-referential piece. But if you can get strong concepts, they kind of work in three parts. The first part is about actually figuring out what is it not, or what's important, what's not. That's a simple concept, but you need to put that on steroids to actually get anywhere with it. You can't really checklist this stuff. You've got to go out and face reality, and there's a high chance that you'll be wrong at the start. But if you can be brutally honest about what is really important and what you can let go of, you will start to see those benefits. You'll start to see kind of the noise in the project disappear. You'll see more clarity. Decision-making will start to speed up. People will start to direct. It's a really nuanced thing, but it's something that you can get better at, and it kind of has all these benefits that flow on into the rest of the project as you go forward. Alignment, priority, focus, all these other things kind of come from that. There's a more kind of fundamental reason, though, as to why concept is powerful, and that has to do with the actual nature of design itself. So nature, the beast that it is, it's a winding, meandering path. It does not want to go in a straight line, basically. So if you can find the things that you can't be flexible on, then you can let everything else go, and you can kind of roll with whatever comes up. Don't try and fight the way design wants to work. It wants to take you off onto this thing. And if you can go with that, you will often find that your best ideas, or some of the greatest ideas you find, are off when you're on that sidetrack over there doing something else. It's something very inherent, but if you can roll with it, it makes life much easier later on. The other part is really about articulation. And that's kind of the key way to think about developing good concept. If I have all the colors of the rainbow to describe an idea to you, and someone else can only describe colors in terms of light and dark, they're never really going to be able to reach the level that I can in terms of developing a great concept and communicating that out. So articulation really comes down to paying attention and practicing the description of all these different aspects that you might have within your concept. The word concept itself, again, thinking about the point of this section is, you can call it whatever you want. I don't really care. Different clients, different projects, different businesses, they are going to have something where they're trying to figure out what this thing is. I like to personally just I tend to head towards the use of principles is what I tend to communicating with people. Very sharp, well-articulated principles. Not fluffy, it will vaguely do something. You want to kind of grow and create that vision around. So don't get caught up on the word concept or any of the other words that I'm going through with these. So a few examples of strong concept. Now, CocoaHeads, so I kind of had to put the iPod in there to kick off with. The 1,000 songs in your pocket thing, it was a great marketing line at the time, but the reason that resonated is because it spoke to the concept of what the iPod was at the time. If you're old enough, you'll remember that MP3 players at the time were absolute rubbish. Sony would they would design something based what I call on, basically designed by spreadsheet. I need to build a slightly better product to this kind of, to this budget, basically. And you're never going to kind of leapfrog or do anything great by working that way. Your concept in that state, in that view, is to be maybe a little bit better than the competition. So, starting from zero and kind of wiping the slate clean and thinking about what you really need kind of gets you to places like that. Uber is another great example. They are basically a company that did not think like a taxi company. They focused on other things, they made other things important, and that's why they got to where they are. They had a very firm sense of what their concept was. And I just threw these guys in for fun. This is a small operation in London called Bombers and Par. They are basically, they work with jelly, is basically the best way I can put it. They do all sorts of jelly-based exhibitions, and they do the most ridiculous stuff you could ever think. I'm pretty sure they're just sitting there coming up with concepts and whatever, which is great. They put this one in 55,000 liters of jelly. There is a whole bunch of tie-ins with lime jelly and lime in the ship and scurvy and all these sorts of things. But from a conceptual point of view, their starting point was we want to put smiles on dials. We want to warp people's brains a little bit. We want a bit of press around these things. And they kind of had that strength of concept. So I'm going to contextualize things in the space of app development a little bit, but it's kind of wide open in terms of where you can start with this stuff. How to get there, how to get strong concepts. Start from zero. You're going to have all this knowledge, but you need to sort of get rid of all your preconceptions, basically. Drill, ask questions, lots of questions. People, you'll usually find on a project, there'll be a meeting where like, oh, we're just trying to get the shape of this thing. And that's kind of the right way to think about it. To get the shape of something, you have to have multiple perspectives. You have to walk up around it and kind of touch it and all this kind of stuff. So if you hear that kind of line, then that's when to kind of zoom in and really start asking those questions. Do you actually understand what's important and what's not? Live it, empathize it. If you can get in and experience the space that this concept or app is going to live, go there and do it. You'll learn a lot more a lot quickly. And don't forget to communicate. So it's good for you to understand and your team to understand. You need to kind of push that out as well. How to know if you've got a strong concept. So go talk to people. Explain like I'm 5 is always fun. Find someone that will endlessly ask you questions and just challenge them to keep going until they get tired and give up, basically. And the other key one is maybe more immediate. If you've got a team at work, ask if the business or if the product owner or whoever's in charge of giving direction was to disappear for a month or 2 months or 6 months, how well would that team carry on? If you've got a strong concept, they'll keep making decisions and keep going in the right direction. So basically, just summing up concept, you basically want to come down from the hill with the 10 commandments. That's kind of what this is about. Had to put that one in it as well. Figure out what your thing is, tell everyone. It's underrated, and each of these ideas are really simple, but hard to master. List. List is really, really underrated. This isn't a wish list, this is an ingredients list. So if you have a strong concept, this all gets a lot easier. Writing things down and writing down what you need is really, really undervalued. It kind of pushes into the next stage that I'll talk about. But I'm going to use a little bit of a silly analogy here. And let's say our concept is, we've got one team and another team. One team's, they've got a strong concept. It's, I want to make a really lovely, rustic roast dinner, beautiful lights, you know, that kind of thing. And the other team is food. My concept is food, right? Weak, strong. So if you're going to get your ingredients, it's basically you're pulling all the things out of the universe that you could get. It's kind of like going to the shopping center. If you're on the good team with the strong concept, you're going to go to the supermarket with your team and they're going to be like, potatoes, yes, it's roast dinner, we need potatoes. Ham, yes, of course. And that's going to go in a good direction for the team that kind of has a really good vision of what they're after. If you're on the team with the not so strong vision, what's going to happen is you're going to be walking past these guys, and you're going to say to your project owner or whatever, do we need sprinkles? And you're going, oh, I love sprinkles. Let's get some. Put them in the trolley. We need those. And then, because no one really knows what's going on, what tends to happen is more people from other departments are in. So Janet is from HR is in part of this as well. She loves Mexicans, so we're getting some tacos now as well. And then before you know it, you're doing some sort of bullshit Twitter integration because God knows why. So again, you can see how this kind of very quickly gets out of control and just starts to muddy the waters. The other part of this that I don't have on this is while it keeps unnecessary stuff out, it's also great for not getting hung up on analyzing things you don't need to. So keeping in with this analogy, if someone's like, oh, do we need carrots or do we need, you know, sweet potato? Well, you don't need actually to spend too much time stressing about that. If it fits the roast dinner, just grab it and go. It's not actually going to make a difference. It doesn't really matter. Bit more of a practical example. So this is the kind of thing that I've done very early on in projects. And we have a tendency in Agile to kind of push the details to later because we don't know. But some stuff you do know up front, and you do know it if you've got a strong concept. This can be really practical. This is, I've got a few screens, I've got one screen here, and you start thinking through it. I'm going to need this many user tasks, this many buttons, a couple of paragraphs for this, a couple of paragraphs for that. And this, again, just starts to develop that articulation and gives you the ability to have higher level conversations. It's back to that rainbow thing with the team earlier on, and that gets you to a better place. You don't have to stop at just UI, though. If you're looking at a project level, you can be like, cool, we need a DevOps, 3 devs, a Fed, whatever it is. List everything that you think you might need. The value in this is, you guys are probably all well across this. We don't do UI designs because wireframes are cheaper and easier to do that. And it's cheaper and easier to just sketch on a piece of paper as well. It's probably quickest and easiest just to bang out a list in 5 to 10 minutes, and you actually get a lot of the value of that sometimes. You do need to go to wireframes, obviously, at some point, but early on, this will get you a long way. Outcomes of list. So, keeping with that analogy, if you've got your list, you know what you're doing, you end up with organized things. You end up with roast, and you end up with places that look like this. If you're the other team, you basically end up with Fire Festival. That's, and the reason I like this is because the Hilton has really strong concept and pretty strong lists. Fire Festival, so much concept, no lists whatsoever. So, next one, architect. Arrange that stuff good. Basically, the question here is, what is the best arrangement of the ingredients given my goals or given my concept? And you can see how they start to kind of lean on each other quite heavily. The answer is always to this question, whatever fits my concept best. So you start making life easier for yourself in one activity by doing a higher level job at the other activity. You can, you do get to this stage of wireframes, obviously, but if you've experienced it where you just do this endless cycle of wireframes, right, and you're constantly going back and people are making changes, it's because either they don't know what's meant to be in there or they don't really know what that thing is meant to be. A little bit of a sidebar on this, just to kind of reiterate this point. So you can see how a strong list of stuff makes it much easier to architect bits and pieces. So the question is, how much or how strongly do you want to link these things together? If I come back to the analogy of one's cooking a dinner and one's riding a bike, you don't want to do those things too much at the same time. Too much overlap is bad. If you're trying to architect and then you're adding more things in, you're just going to go around in circles. Basically, this is healthy. Ooh, hello. Smooth. This is healthy. You want to be kind of ramping down one activity and ramping up into the other. And that's not because so much because that makes sense in a process flow. It's because if you're focused on one of these things, you're more likely to get into the state of flow. You're more likely to get into a good space where you can focus and do better work in each of those activities. Again, non-linear. You could go round in this a number of times, and that's completely fine. Just don't try and do both of them at the same time. So detail. If you don't know Charles and Ray Eames, they're one of my favorites. They're from about 50 years ago. They're a good couple. They're worth looking up. They have a lot of good comments on design. This quote about detail is, people often go, oh, it's just this fluff, or it's the corner radius or whatever. I'm not going to worry too much about that. But it is stuff that matters. It's stuff, the detail is what you notice on almost a subconscious level with things. And I'm going to use UI examples, but it could be anything. The analogy I have is, again, back with music. If you have music and you have it with a lot of low bass, you don't really hear it, you feel it. And that's the same with details. You may not notice it, but if it's all there and it's done well, you're even more likely to notice it. Less. To reiterate that point about concept, right? If we go back to the boats analogy, and you're asking, well, what should the floor be, right? The architecture tells you, yep, floor is here. If you're a luxury liner, you might be carpet, marble, that kind of thing. Warship, non-slip tiles. If I tell you I've got a boat, it's between 10 and 700 feet long, it's got seats, a horn, anchor, a crane, and a salad bar, what flooring should it have? Again, yes? Bouncy castle? Hey, not bad. Again, all these things, so when you get to the level of detail, you're bringing in list, architecture, and your concept, all to kind of answer these questions. Detail is really about craft. And in the visual design space, it's all about these visual design pieces. I'm going to talk about that. But if you're coders, what you're doing there at the code level, that is your craft, right? And so those details, how things are indented, how things are commented, all this kind of stuff does make a difference in the long run. So a little bit of another sidebar. So I'm going to drop into some specific stuff about visual design. I won't try not to get too fluffy on you. To my mind, there's actually quite a great logic within this stuff. So I'd be remiss if I didn't start with design elements. Now, who's seen anything that looks like this before? A few people, yeah. Who's actually fine with pulling out Photoshop or Sketch? Who kind of does that? Master? Okay, cool. Okay. If you haven't seen this before, it's worth Googling visual design elements and principles, which I have on the next slide. They kind of get taught like shit most of the time. People take it really literally, and they think that line means line on a page. That's not what this stuff is about. All of this stuff is important because what it does to your brain and your eyes. So for example, point will hold your attention, and you will look at that. You didn't tell yourselves to look at that blue dot, but your eye moved there without you actually willing it, right? You can't help look at points. Lines are all about moving your eye. Your eye will want to follow lines, right, without you actually asking it to. And it's not just a line, it's anything that your brain thinks is a line momentarily. It might be two different objects that lined up or a bunch of colors that look like a line. Shape, form, kind of same things. That's where the brain starts actually thinking it's something physical, and it gives it a mental weight. So I won't go through all of these, but the takeout here really is you've got these levers that you can pull in visual design at a very, very basic level to kind of get the body and the eyes to do things. The other half of it is the visual design principles. And these are basically all about grouping. The brain is basically a pattern recognition engine. That's what it does. It's always looking for patterns. And I think the thinking on this stuff comes back to caveman days where you're always looking out for the get eaten by the lion and that kind of thing. But if it's useful to you, a way to think about visual design is you are basically doing pattern management. And that's kind of all you're doing. Pattern management and grouping, really. If you have a lot of stuff, or the brain perceives a lot of stuff, well, then it's got to work harder to look through all these things. If you've got two things, it's easier, and it's going to jump into accepting it. Line's one of my favorite, and just to illustrate how powerful this is, there's no circle here at all. But you see one because your brain, our edge detection is one of the most out of control things. We're really, really in tune with that. We'll see a circle because our eyes follow the line and create the rest of that. Now, I'll get off the theory because I've talked about that enough. And I'll give you some examples. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a well-known app and I'm going to make it worse, basically. And the way I'm going to make it worse is I'm going to use some of those levers that I talked about, and I'm going to start screwing around with them. So I've taken Messenger, just because we all know it and it's easy to work with. This is the default. I've just grabbed this screenshot out of the App Store, basically. And if we remove some alignment, not too bad. Take a little bit more out. Maybe we want that centered there for some reason. Interesting as well, we've also created two eye lines here. We've got the very left one, and then we've got the one that starts at the circle at the top and aligns with all the text. So we've kind of added more things for the brain to try and work through. You can take out contrast. Things start to change a little bit more. I'm going to throw off the balance of the menu at the bottom and destroy the proportion of those. And I've only done a few of these things here. That's after, that's before. Now, whether you think that's better, and I've been subtle here on purpose, or that's better, is kind of comes down to your concept. What are you actually trying to draw focus to here? you can get really drastic, you can get really drastic and take all the color out. That's the only change between the first one and the last one. Take all the color out of that, right? Just one of those levers. And if you kind of take a little bit of a mental step back there for a little bit, your brain, between this, that should look like 8, 9 groups. This probably looks like 3 groups to you. You're going to have a thing at the top, you've got a really solid line that divides that. You've got another thing in the middle, and they're all together because of the same color, the same shape, and the way the pattern is. And then you've got all this black and white stuff down there at the bottom. Because there's not much distinguishing from it, your brain is kind of putting it in a little bit of a box. Maybe that's good. Maybe you want 3 things. Maybe the stuff up the top is more important. Maybe it's not. It's kind of up to you to make that decision. But this kind of links back to some of the points I was making around having a sexy button, all those fonts. It all comes back to what you're trying to do using those levers. Doesn't have to apply to UI. I've grabbed this. I've taken all the words out. The actual particulars are not important. That's way more readable. And the only thing that's going on there is I've used line to talk about the primary piece there, and I've called that out. And while it is a small difference, if we start adding more and more stuff to this, these things become complicated quite quickly. Someone that sees this, if you're in a meeting and they kind of see this and they go, cool, and then 6 weeks away they haven't worked on this, they're going to remember it a little bit better, they're going to take it on board a little bit better, and it's going to help everything move forward. So you can apply this anywhere. If you're going to ask me what are those elements and principles do I choose when, there's no easy answers, I'm sorry. It kind of depends on what you want. Look for guidance from your architecture and your conceptual needs. Try stuff out. Minimal's good. It's kind of easier to get the hang of. Just use, and if you really want some advice, just use Futura and a lot of white space. That works pretty well. And if you are drawing up an architectural diagram or you are doing a mock-up, screw around with some of those levers and just see which ones resonate with you. Some will. I like line. That's what I work with. That's when people talk about artistic style or their style, they're actually talking about the person's use of that stuff. So you can get away with using a couple to serve your purposes. Had to put a squircle in here. The outcomes of detail. It's a hard thing to describe in words. The best analogy I have is that bass music feel. If you do this stuff, people don't notice it, but they feel it's better or they understand it better. The way I also talk about it sometimes is concept is detail in abstract and detail is detail in detail, if that makes any sense whatsoever. The squircle is, you guys all know about this, I'm sure? Yeah? No? Got a few nods, a few shows. I've got a show of hands who knows about the squircle. Ah, interesting. All right. So, some more homework for you guys. Have a Google on the squircle. Every one of your MacBooks, the corner on the edge there, it's not a perfectly rounded corner, it's a squircle. And what's special about it is basically it's a less aggressive corner. It is the tiniest difference, but it fits in with Apple's design philosophy and concept of flow, smoothness, creativity, which means I want the smoothest line I can possibly have. And mathematically, a squircle is smoother than a rounded corner. So look that one up. To finish off, I'm not going to talk about test too much because you guys already have a wealth of knowledge around this stuff. But test your ideas, test your concepts, build them and test them. Use what you know from agile and software testing practices. That stuff's pretty much good for everything. You can adapt it pretty easily. Always go for qualitative and quantitative. And let go of your baby. If you're designing anything, there's always a tendency to kind of hold on to bits and pieces and be like, that's mine, I've done it, I've come up, it's a great idea, I don't want to let go of it. But you kind of got to throw it out and let it be what it will be. That's kind of it. That's the 5 activities or 5 ways to look at 5 activities of design. If you get good at these, they'll help all the other ones. You'll end up with better concepts. You'll end up with better products. You'll end up with better architectural diagrams, hopefully. It matters. Any questions, guys? No? Just stunned everyone into submission.
Yeah. So coming from a guy that doesn't know anything about design at all, what would be some good resources to better educate myself on the design philosophies of iOS apps?
On iOS apps?
Yeah, that's the medium I'm currently working with, but also design principles in general as well. That would.
From a front end or a back end perspective, do you work in or?
I'd say front end at the moment.
Okay.
But it's an app.
Okay. You sure you know where you're working or?
No, I'm building my own app, so.
Yeah. Look, from an app point of view, if you're looking at UI, I would direct you to look at these at a very base level. There's kind of layers of principles, basically. At a very base level, you've got these visual elements and principles, and that stuff's in your DNA, right? There's just no getting away from that. On top of that, we start to learn stuff, so principles come out of that. So the iOS guidelines are actually really good as a starting point, the Apple design guidelines. I'd take a look at some of the other ones as well. So the material stuff and a lot of what the other majors have put together is actually really good stuff for app or digital design. The other thing I direct you towards is there's a lot you can read about UX heuristics as well. So the principles of things like affordance and all these kinds of things are really key. A lot of it comes down to psychological kind of biases and things first, but that's the kind of stuff I'd look up. Yeah.
Any more questions?
No? Another comment. Dermot, are you going to run like workshops or something? That sounds. I was standing at the back here, going, "This could be like a workshop." I'm waiting for you to kind of run me through an activity now. Like,
yeah. Look.
Now write this down. Now do that.
There's a lot more. I kind of threw a lot in here because it's a very wide view on design. I guess I'd say just I'd love to run workshops. I tried to simplify it down, though, so much to these very kind of plain English kind of bits and pieces, because at the end of the day, if you're creating something, we have all these big words in technology for all these fancy things, but it usually boils down to actually a very simple thing that we're trying to do. And paying attention to that, I find to be really powerful, at least in my work. So, yeah. Cool. Thanks, guys. Cheers.
All right, we'll take a few minutes. I've just closed all my activity rings. It's 2 minutes past 8. We'll take 10 minutes, get a refresher, head to the bathroom, and we'll be back with Vlas and some AR kit magic.